everyone, long time no see or chat. Today I wanted to just do a completely random video because I wanted to. That's basically it. I have gotten back into reading quite a bit in the last year, probably since January actually, so like 6 months. And I'm really enjoying it, and the reason why I got back into reading, quite controversial, but the reason I got back into reading was because I actually got a Kindle and it just really helped me to read really quickly, and I was absolutely flying through books. So yeah, if you're someone that is really slow at reading books and struggles to pay attention, I would really recommend the Kindle because it's really good, and those stats at the bottom are like crack. Like getting to see how long you have left in a chapter, it just makes it feel so much more feasible and so much more enjoyable, and yeah, I would recommend it. The reason why I'm doing this video today is because I actually want to talk about one book in particular, and that is Fourth Wing. So this one you guys have probably already heard about. It's become really popular on TikTok, or on Booktok I should say, and I actually read this I think back in March, February or March, and literally the month it came out, so it was end of March. So I loved this book. Like, this was not only like my first 5-star read of the year, but I honestly feel like this is one of the best books I've ever read, like ever. I'm going to dive into my review of this book, so I am going to try and keep this video as spoiler free as possible, but I can't guarantee it. So I will do my best, but I will also try and mark where there are spoilers in this video. I actually read a mix between the book and the Kindle version, so I just want to show you guys the actual book. So this is it without the dust jacket on it. So I didn't get like a special edition or anything, literally just the standard edition. I did, however, pre-order the special edition sprayed edges version of the sequel, which I'll talk about later. But inside the cover we have the map, the all-important map. And I love a good map, honestly. I do wish this one had like the tiniest bit more detail on it, because there are other books that I've read that had so much effort gone into their maps and like the illustration style and everything. That was my only fault with this book, but honestly didn't really matter. So it's a hefty book, but what is our page count actually? Let's just have a little check. So it's 498 pages, but the text, I'll actually go to like one of the first pages so I'm not spoiling it. The text is not overly like tiny, so it's actually a fine font size. I would say that's like font size 11 or 10. But yeah, it's actually fine. And I really love having the physical copy of books, even though I read it for the majority of the time on the Kindle, because let me tell you, this book I got through in about like 4 days, and for me the average time it takes to get through a book, even if I'm really interested in it, is 3 weeks. So, and that 3 weeks was quick. Please just appreciate the fact that I devoured this book. So we are going to get into my annotations, so bear with while I get them up. So I actually have not looked at my annotations since I finished this book. So I'm very interested to see what the notes are. So just to summarize the kind of plot of this book, I'm going to read you the plot, and I'm going to give you what my idea of the plot is. So I'm just literally reading it off the dust jacket. But the plot goes: welcome to the brutal and elite world of Basquiat's War College. 20-year-old Violet Sarangil was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant, living a quiet life amongst books in history. Now the commanding general, her toughest talent's mother, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates striving to become the elite of Navarre dragon riders. Now the thing with these fantasy novels is you never actually really know how to pronounce these things, so I'm just going to do my best, okay? But when you're smaller than everyone else and your body is brittle, death is only a heartbeat away, because dragons don't bond to fragile humans, they incinerate them. With fewer dragons willing to bond than cadets, most would kill Violet to better their own chances of success. The rest would kill her just for being her mother's daughter. Like Xaden Rierson, the most powerful and ruthless wing leader, I'm saying that correctly, not ringleader, wing leader, in the Riders Quadrant. She'll need every edge her wits can give her just to see the next sunrise. Yet, with every day that passes, the war outside grows more deadly, the kingdom's protective wards are failing, and the death toll continues to rise. Even worse, Violet begins to suspect leadership is hiding a terrible secret. Everyone at Basquiat has an agenda, so sleep with one eye open, because once you enter, there are only 2 ways out: graduate or die. What do you think? Yeah, I found that this book had everything. Like, everything that I love about a book and more that I didn't even realise I needed in a book. So, to start off, it was like a school/college setting, which I love. I really like secret history. I really like the kind of environment of learning, because I find that that's where I am happiest, like in college or in school or wherever, just like learning things. So I really like that aspect of it. And then this is actually the first novel in the fantasy genre that I had read this year, and that I had read in a long while, because I tended not to gravitate towards fantasy because it wasn't really something that I was too fond of, because when I thought of fantasy, I thought of Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, which were quite like dense fantasy novels, very dense world building, whereas this one didn't really have that at all. You were still enveloped in the general world, but it wasn't like you had to memorize like 75 different world names. So that was fine. So there was the world building aspect of it that I really liked, the kind of setting it was in. And also the main character, Violet, it's kind of chronic illness representation, and some of you may know I have a chronic illness, I have chronic kidney disease, and just that kind of representation alone was something I didn't realise that I wanted or needed in a book, but seeing that was just amazing, and seeing throughout the book that despite her frailties and despite her illness, which is never really disclosed, she is like super strong, she uses her wits, and she has different ways that aren't physical of overcoming her obstacles, which I absolutely loved, and it was really encouraging to see. And then there was the romance arc, which God, I loved it. So I am a sucker for enemies to lovers, okay? So like we're talking like Pride and Prejudice kind of thing, where they both absolutely cannot stand each other, and yet. So that was the kind of storyline that was happening, but it was done super cleverly, because it was basically where you're like, will they, won't they? And you assume that they might, but then you have so many lingering doubts of if they will or not, and I don't really want to say too much because it's just so good, and that alone makes it worth reading this book, because how it's executed is perfect, because you're always suspicious of this particular character, like throughout the whole book, the entire book, you're suspicious of them, and it leaves you guessing, it leaves you wondering, and doesn't give away too much, and has you continuing reading just so that you could try and figure out this character. So it's fantastic. And then on top of that, the whole like romance arc, we had the kind of government corruption arc, which I love. I'm always listening to conspiracy theories podcasts and things like that are to do with like corruption and like hidden secrets and governments and like all this kind of thing. So when this came up, I was like, give me all of that. Like, I want to read all about the shady shit that's happening in this college. So it was just an absolute masterpiece of a book. So with that, I am going to go into my notes. Have no idea what I've said, but we're going to go with it and we're going to read them anyway. So in chapter 11, I had highlighted the first chapter, or the first paragraph that introduced Heaton. So Heaton is a character that uses they them pronouns, and this is the first time I had encountered the use of they them pronouns for a character in a book ever, and I literally just said they them pronouns yup, which means excellent. It was just so well done, and it was just inserted seamlessly into the story. There was no big like hullabaloo made about it. It was just like, oh, it was like if you didn't even pay much attention to this character, you wouldn't even realise that they use they them pronouns. But I'll just read the introductory paragraph of Heaton. So it was just, best of luck, Heaton, The thickest third year in our squad, with red flames cut and dyed into their hair, taps their heart right over 2 of their patches and offers us all a genuine but flat-lipped smile before heading to class. It was just so subtle, and like, if you weren't paying much attention, like I said, you would just breeze past that and be like, okay, Heaton, cool, another character. Heaton does play a role kind of throughout the book, but is a very minor role. But even still, just having a character in there with that representation was just so great to see. So there are so many notes that I just highlighted and just said lol. So I'm just really adding to the literary value of this book. Okay, so I'm not going to give away who says this, but it was, he can read my thoughts, quote, see, smartest of your year, unquote. So much for privacy, quote, you'll never be alone again, unquote. And I just said, lol. But also, when that line came up, I was like, oh, that's an interesting turn of events. I wonder how that's going to play into this whole scenario. And it was used really well. It was just used super duper well. So yeah, lol. Oh yeah, I really like this quote. So this is said by Violet towards her dragons. Does she say it out loud? Yes, she does. Tell me it's going to be all right, I murmur towards Andarna and Tern. It is how it should be. And that's what Tern says to her. And I really like that quote because he's not necessarily giving her false hope that something is going to turn out the way that she wants it to, but it's also hopeful in that it is how it's supposed to be and everything's going to work out how it's meant to work out. So yeah, I just really like that quote. Oh yeah, and chapter 18, this quote I could really relate to. So I'm going to read the quote first. Basically, Violet says, it's hard to love a second home as much as the first. I swallow. It's easy when the second home is the right one. So this one, I had grown up in a house for 21 years. I was in the same house for 21 years, which is kind of a rarity for our generation. And then ended up going to a new house when I was 21, and that's where my family home is now. And I just like really related to that line because I absolutely loved that home. And it is very hard to love a second home as much as the first, because the majority of your childhood memories, which are your happiest in your head, happen in your childhood home, obviously, and happen in your first home. But also, it's easy when the second home is the right one. It ends up feeling like home again because more people move into your old home and it's not your home anymore, it's just a house. And you've moved all of your memories and your general spirit to the second house. So I just really thought that that was an interesting quote. Okay, so I'm not going to mention the name that's mentioned in this because it will be a spoiler. But I'm just really laughing at my note here. So this is in chapter 20. Maybe I could talk to blank. Maybe we can still work through our issues. Maybe we can find common ground, turn our anger into friendship, or at least casual indifference. And I just noted, bitch, she tried to kill you. That's really it. So, but that would be me. Like, if someone really tried to do me dirty, I'd be like, but maybe we can be friends. Chapter 21, this was a quote that I really related to. This is by Violet again, where she deals with like physical ailments kind of throughout the story on and off, which I relate to as well. And she says, we make the ascent and I note with some satisfaction that my legs feel strong today. I love the days when my body cooperates. And I have literally said that line, I love the days when my body cooperates, pre-transplant. I had a kidney transplant early in the year, by the way. And before my transplant, there were days when I would have really bad days and be really sick and not be able to get out of bed. And then there'd be days when I'd be up and about and walking around and be like, wow, this is great. My body is cooperating. So then when I had read that line, I was like, I feel that. Like, it was just so nice to see that representation and that thought process in somebody else, in another character. So yeah, I really appreciated that. So this is another quote where I just said LMAO. So basically, Violet and her friend Rhiannon are looking at two of the males' wing leaders training, and long story short, they have the shirts off. It's all a big thing, and it goes, quote, "That is ... unquote, Rhiannon murmurs beside me. Quote, "It sure is, unquote, I agree." And then Liam goes, quote, "Stop objectifying our wing leader," unquote. And I just said LMAO, and I just thought that was a really funny quote. So, page 351, this is also in chapter 22. I said, oh yeah. So there's like a bit of a tension between two of the main guys in the story, because, you know, it's almost Twilight-esque, but it's done a lot better, I promise. So basically, Xaden says about Dane, so Xaden is kind of like the bad boy-ish, and then Dane is like the good guy. Or like, yeah, so that's the best way to clarify them. But Xaden says, "You choose the oddest times to defend her," speaking about Violet, Atos. Xaden all but rolls his eyes and he looks at Dane, "And the most convenient times not to." And I just said, oop. So, yeah. So, editing me. So, in this quote with Dane and Xaden, at the time, I couldn't remember exactly the context that they said this in, but looking back on it now, I do remember. So basically, Dane had this thing with Violet where they were like kind of childhood friends, and he was always overprotective of her, which I say in the video. But then there are times where she is like in actual danger, and he's like, well, these are the things that you kind of need to deal with. So there's like really weird times that he could protect her and he doesn't, and I think that that's where Xaden is coming from. So just to add some context to that situation, okay, bye. So chapter 23, this one I highlighted just because I quite liked this line from Violet. She's speaking to Dane, who is basically her childhood friend, and they've been friends for quite a long time. But as a result, he is quite protective of her. And it ends up that he is preventing her from doing a lot of things in order to grow, because he's afraid of her getting sick or her getting hurt, or because she's sick and frail and, you know, thinks that she is incapable, essentially. And Violet says, "I know you just want to keep me safe, Dane, but keeping me safe is keeping me from growing too." And I really like that, because she knows in herself what her capabilities are, and how she's also very much aware that she needs to experience hardships in order to grow. So yeah, I really like that, and I just said preach. So also in chapter 23, this was a really good example of how you were kept being suspicious of a certain character. I'm just going to blank out who they're talking about, but so blank has secrets, reasons to never forgive your mother, and I don't want him to use you to get his revenge. And I essentially said, he's gonna, I'm calling it. And Rebecca Yarros does such a good job of interlacing that tension throughout the story. No matter how it deviates, you keep that seed of doubt in your head, and I just really like that. There's kind of always a will he, won't he sort of vibe. And yeah. And also this quote from chapter 29, this is Andarna, who is the really small, really cute dragon, says, "I'm proud you're mine." Andarna's voice wavers, the blinks of her eyes becoming slower. And I just said, I love her. Andarna is so cute. I love Andarna. She's basically, this is not really a spoiler, but she's just like this really cute little baby dragon, and I love her. I love her. Oh yeah, so page 474, this is from Dane, and he says to Violet, and if you don't want, so I don't really want to contextualize why he's saying this because it's a little spoilery. He says, and if you don't want to use that kind of power again, you don't have to. And I just said, nah, bro. Because I was like, Dane screw you, okay? So yeah, it was just a really interesting narrative where he is trying to protect Violet, but I started to grow suspicious as to why. That's not really, that was just my inner workings of my brain. It's not really spoiling anything. And I just said, nah, bro, let's like stop this now. you're being clingy now. This line. I cannot deal with this line. And I think a lot of fans of Fourth Wing quote it because it's just so good. And basically, very early on in the book, Xaden calls Violet violence because he thinks that she is like quite vicious and quite intent in what she does. Which I kind of respect because Dane is kind of the opposite, but he says, there is nowhere in existence you could go that I wouldn't find you violence. And I said, god damn. So that's all I'm going to give you of that. So here's another quote from chapter 39, which I found was really poignant. I can't remember who says it, but it says, funny how people rename everything that makes them feel uncomfortable. And this really just reminded me of like history in general, but particularly like Black history and like slavery movement and everything like that. That things get renamed in order to make it seem less awful and in order to make it seem more digestible. And also dealing with, I suppose, language censorship in the US right now, and how things are being renamed, courses are being renamed, especially if they have to do with Black history or gender studies. There are lecturers literally renaming their courses in order to avoid being prosecuted. So that just was really poignant to me, and I was like, wow, this is the truth. And that's actually the end of my annotations. I thought that I had annotated a lot more, but obviously not. But basically, my rundown of the book is, it has everything that I want in a book. It has drama, it has like enemies to lovers, it has the corruption, it has like progressive like characters, it has like diverse characters, it has the fantasy, and it's not too overbearing, it's not too heavy, but it's just so good. And I just have to comment on the ending. The ending is just, I was literally trying not to scream at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I stayed up to finish this book. I was determined to finish this book. I was on like, I think it was about 200 pages out of, no, not 200 pages out, that's halfway through. I think it was like 100 pages out of finishing it, and it was about midnight, and I was like, no, I need to finish this book because it started to get really interesting. Well, no, the whole thing was really interesting, but there were things happening that I just could not put down the book and pick it back up the next day. I just couldn't do it. So read the whole thing, and once it got to the end, I was like, oh my, like, how am I meant to sleep now because of what just happened? So it was one of those books that just, it doesn't leave you once you put it down. You keep thinking about it, and there is a sequel coming. It's called Iron Flame. It was only announced about a month ago, I think. And I have pre-ordered it. I've pre-ordered a special edition because I didn't manage to get the special edition of Fourth Wing, and I don't want to make that mistake again. But really excited for Iron Flame, and that one is basically just a continuation of Fourth Wing, essentially. All the same characters, same storyline, everything, and I am really excited to see where it's gonna go. I hope you guys enjoyed this little video of just chatting about a book that I have enjoyed in the last little while. Let me know in the comments if you have read Fourth Wing, and if you have, what did you think of it? Try not to give spoilers for anyone that hasn't read it, and also comment below if you're going to read it as a result of this video. But I would highly recommend it. It was a 5-star for me, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that book, and I think that I've said a lot. So I will leave you guys at that, and do like this video if you kind of want to see more bookish videos from me, and yeah, have a good day. Bye!